right, take one and two, one. This is as close as we can get to the base of the World Trade Center. You can see the two towers. Debris continues to fall and to rain on the people below. There are people hanging from the windows 90 stories up, and a number of bodies have actually hit the pavement. Another one? Take two. Take two and two, one. This is as close as we can get to the base of the World Trade Center. You can see the firemen assembled here, the police officers, FBI agents, and you can see the two towers. A huge explosion now, raining debris on all of us.
Employ aircraft for demolition. It may be conceded that the bomb air raids by dirigibles thus far have failed of decisive results, that they have only added to the general suffering and horror of it all. And here's the point. These same aircraft might readily be converted into means by which cities and forts and munitions factories could be reduced to beds of whitened ashes, and which could exterminate every living thing from the face of the earth. One single demonstration of the stupendous demolition made possible by such a weapon would be all sufficient to bring the opposing forces instantly to sue for terms of peace. Although several devices might be employed for this purpose, I shall cite but one to show how readily either army faction could establish a method of warfare which would make for the immediate termination of war. A vast, incendiary arc. An airship of the gas or Zeppelin type, developing 200 to 400 horsepower, could be equipped with a high-voltage electrical generator. For the project intended, almost the full energy of the engines might be devoted to driving the dynamo, since the speed of the craft in operation would be a secondary consideration. For a suitable reel in electrical connection with the dynamo, thin wires would be lowered until their nether ends reached to within a certain distance from the ground or the tops of the buildings of a city. Through these suspended wires there would be discharged several million-volt currents of electricity. Between the lower ends of the wires and the earth there would then be formed a tremendous arc, which would consume with its terrific heat not only every human being and living thing, but also every building and every atom of combustible material over and near which this incendiary arc should pass. The destructive radius would be at least 75 to 100 yards from the electrical generation of engines of, say, 200 horsepower, although with engines of 500 horsepower the radius of incendiary effect might easily be 200 to 300 yards or even more, especially if the wire area were extended by the use of stretcher bars underneath the airship. A highly sensitive automatic regulator controlling the reels constantly would adjust the length of the lowered wires to maintain a proper distance between the discharge ends of the wire and the earth to produce and preserve an uninterrupted arc. If the craft were provided with auxiliary engines for motive power, it might travel with considerable speed, sweeping a path clean of every form of life and every vestige of man's creation. Also, such a craft could sail at a great height, sufficiently high, in fact, to be barely visible to the naked eye, and certainly well beyond the range of anti-aircraft guns. Surrender, swift, and final. 2 or 3 such arc ships side by side, traveling parallel with an enemy's lines, would leave in their wake a mass of smoldering ruins, of bomb-proof trenches, supply trains, munitions wagons, gun carriages, fences, homesteads, and villages, and strewn through all the charred and fire-shriveled bodies of soldiers fallen helpless before this irresistible and all-consuming force. Particularly if such an airship raid were made at night, the chances of repulsing or even reaching the enemy fleet would be practically nil. No sane government would hesitate about flying the white flag in face of such a gruesome cataclysm. Surrender, swift and final, would be the only human alternative. Burning helpless women. Moving in squadrons or line abreast, a fleet of these aircraft could sweep over large cities, even such as London, Berlin, Paris, Vienna, Rome, Petrograd, or Constantinople, and leave them a blackened, smoking, and lifeless ruin. Perhaps not even the most war-crazed power ever would venture such an immeasurable and unpardonable outrage against mankind, involving as it would the burning of helpless women and children and non-combatants. Yet such heinous offenses against civilization and the once recognized rules of war have been and still are being committed, even though it be on an insignificant scale as compared with the possibilities of the device suggested for the arc craft, yet one may not forget that such incendiary raids are being carried on to the limit of the means thus far developed. What they might attempt with more destructive agencies is seriously open to question. The humanitarian side. However, it is largely due to the fact that the aerial raids with present equipment do not make for decisive results, that the powers continue to tolerate such revolting tactics of warfare, electing to take the gambler's chance of escape in future. But, and this is the humanitarian side to this suggested engine of annihilation, if either belligerent should equip and place in active service an effective fleet of these arc-producing incendiary aircraft, and should make due announcement to enemy nations of a proposed raid upon its cities or its forces in the field, such an act would be equivalent to serving notice of a demand for surrender, and beyond peradventure, it would promptly and unconditionally be accepted. From the desk of Nikola Tesla, read by Thomas Edison.